But let's move on into our next topic, and what we're looking at is Jonathan Taylor of the Wisconsin Badgers. Before we get into that, though, make sure to go over to twitch.tv/mostvaluablepodcast and give us a follow. Also, if you have Twitch Prime, if you have Amazon Prime, throw us that free sub that Amazon Prime gives you each and every month. You got it. If you ain't using it, why not throw it over to us? Help us. It's a way to kind of like Patreon. If you're like, hey, you know what, Ricky, I would love, people shoot me comments all the time or shoot us comments all the time. I would love to support you guys on Patreon, but I don't have the $1. I don't have the $5. I don't even have the $10 to give you guys. How can I help? This is one way. Amazon Prime. If you already have Amazon Prime, I'm not saying to go and get it if you don't have it, but it's kind of like what Jim Gaffigan said on the Joe Rogan podcast. Everyone's got Amazon Prime. If you do, and you're not using it, or if you're like, shit, Ricky, I didn't even know that Amazon Prime gave me a free Twitch sub, go over to twitch.tv/mostvaluablepodcast, throw us that free sub each and every month. That's the only thing. You got to keep doing it each month. Just 1 month helps us out, gets us a little bit extra cash so we can get to our ultimate goal of the MVP studio. So go ahead, twitch.tv/mostvaluablepodcast. Also, we're going to be streaming podcasts there. We do our live reactions for mock drafts there. We also will actual drafts. And we're also playing games on the nerdy side, playing some WoW, playing some Borderlands, playing some MLB The Show. Going to be playing some NBA 2K, obviously. I think Dave's going to get it for sure. I'm still on the fence, but I probably will at some point. So go ahead and follow us at twitch.tv/mostvaluablepodcast. But let's get into what we're really talking about here on the podcast. And that's Jonathan Taylor. And the whole reason I wanted to talk about this was not only did Jonathan Taylor have a phenomenal game, well, a phenomenal half of a game because he exited that Michigan game early with a cramp. I know that he's questionable, may not play against Northwestern. We'll see. But as I'm watching the game, I heard the color commentator, who his name escapes me as I'm doing the podcast right now, but the commentator said that, hey, Jonathan Taylor reminds me of a Ezekiel Elliott. And I'm like, I know what you mean. He was talking in terms of the Heisman race, because right now, Jonathan Taylor, after that game, he's getting a lot of Heisman buzz, which I said in the Heisman prediction video, I don't think Jonathan Taylor wins the Heisman, because in order to do that, back in that video, it'll pop up above me, a little card. I won't regurgitate it, but it's like the stats that like a Mark Ingram had to put up or a Derrick Henry had to put up for the Heisman. Some pretty good stats. Plus, some of those guys you're also, I know the quarterback side, hey, you're receiving or you're rushing and you're passing. I think a quarterback, especially in this class, is going to win it. But hey, you know what? None of the quarterbacks have really blown us out of the water except for with me earlier in the year with a Jalen Hurts, and I talked about him in a draft video already. But it kind of got me thinking on a different sense of not necessarily can Jonathan Taylor win the Heisman, but where will he go in the NFL draft? Because if we look at it, the last couple of years, 2018, I mean, this past year, I'll look up 2019. I don't think we didn't have a running back go super high in the NFL draft. For 2019, if I'm going to look top 5, because I've got 2, top 5 we did not. The first running back that went was Josh Jacobs, that's right, and he went at 24. So this past year kind of broke the trend, but if we think about it, 2018, we had Saquon Barkley. He went 2nd overall. Then 2017, we had Leonard Fournette. He went 4th overall. Before that, in 2016, we had Ezekiel Elliott. He also went 4th overall. And then the year before, in 2015, we had Todd Gurley go 10th overall to the LA Rams. So kind of a 4-year streak of running backs going in the top 10, a 3-year streak then after that 2015 year of running backs going in the top 5. And the question I wanted to ask with that is, could Jonathan Taylor be a top 5 pick in this year's NFL draft? And my first thought, because how I usually work here when it's a podcast by myself is, if you guys are new, I kind of work it through with you guys, where I give you the exact thought and then we kind of talk through it together. And my first thought when I proposed that question in my mind was, no way he'll be a top 5 pick. There's not a chance that he's a top 5 pick, because how many, like, you've got Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, I think, is the top 5 pick. Jerry Jeudy, I think, will be in the top 5. Chase Young will be in the top 5. And then maybe like a Derek Brown, maybe a AJ, I'm going to blank on his name or screw it up, Penza from Iowa, the pass rusher from Iowa. Really, that 5th spot is up for grabs, so he could, I guess, sneak into it. But my first thought was no, Jake Fromm might even be a top 5 pick at that point. And I know what you're saying, Ricky. It's way too early to kind of see where these guys are going. We don't even know what teams are there. But looking as of right now, just statistically, what's going on? Jonathan Taylor, so far this season, I'm going to spit off some stats at you really quick. So last year, he was over a 2,000-yard rusher, but this year he's got 440 yards, 7 touchdowns, only 7 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns. Then you got Ezekiel Elliott. I'm just going to use his last year. He had just over 1,800 rushing yards. He had 23 rushing touchdowns, 200, a little bit over 200, 206 receiving yards, 0 receiving touchdowns. Leonard Fournette will go in order of when they were drafted. Leonard Fournette, he only played 7 games. He had 843 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, 146 receiving yards, no receiving touchdowns, but was almost a 2,000-yard rusher the year before. And then Saquon Barkley, he ran for almost 1,300. He had 1,271 in his last year, 18 touchdowns like he had before the year prior. Then 632 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. And here's kind of the first, I was thinking about this right before I hit the record button, is each of these guys I feel like is very different, or I shouldn't say very different, but they're unique to one another, because the way I was kind of, and I don't know how this analogy is going to land, somebody can maybe say, well, Ricky, maybe you meant this, hey, kind of help me out here. This is a working analogy. It's not perfect. It's like a stand-up comedian. This bit is not complete. I may need your help to kind of fill in some holes, but the kind of thought that I was having was each of these guys as a running back is very different, where I think of Zeke at first, and I think of the year that he had his last year before he was drafted. He's kind of like the high-end sports car to me, where it's like he's going to have the flash, he's going to have the power, he's going to have the horsepower too, because he's a fast running back. But you know what? It may not be the most reliable car. You may not, and this isn't like a running back over time. This is just what we've seen from Zeke, where it's like a little, where he's the high class of the running back, where, hey, with the good, you may have some bad when it comes to Zeke. So I look at him as kind of like the high-end muscle car or the sports car kind of version. Then I look at Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette, to me, is more of that. He's the car, I almost wanted to say, almost kind of like a pickup truck, where it's like you're going for power. He was the guy coming out. The biggest thing we were talking about is how he put that Ole Miss defender in the grave and how he would just run guys over and demolish them. And it was like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what he does against guys at the next level. I kind of almost want to say he's that pickup truck, that raw power of a running back. Then you got Saquon, which to me, I kind of like, I don't know exactly what car. I'm kind of leaning more towards an SUV maybe. And the reason why I say that is, and maybe this is where you guys can help me out, when I see Saquon, he's kind of the running back where it's like he does a little bit of both. Can use him in the run game, can use him in the pass game. More so than Zeke, way more so than Leonard Fournette. And that's where I kind of feel like Saquon's that car where it's like, hey, I got this SUV. I'm going to use it for family life, for my personal life, but I'm also going to use it for work as well. Kind of like I'm using it for a dual purpose. It's got dual purposes, dual meanings, rushing, receiving. That's where I'm going with Saquon. To where then I got to Jonathan Taylor, and I'm like, well, what would he be then? Because he's not the high-end sports car. He's not the power back. And when I say power back, he's not as much of a power back as Leonard Fournette is. And he's not as dual threat as Saquon Barkley. And the thing I've kind of sat on with Jonathan Taylor in this analogy is at first I was like, oh, maybe he's like the high-end luxury car. But then I kind of backed off on that because I think he's a mix of the car that you're going to get if you purchase the Jonathan Taylor car. And this is where car owners can help me out because I drive a Nissan Rogue. Like, that's my thing, and it's reliable. Maybe that's Jonathan Taylor, where he's that car where it's like, hey, you know what? It's not the high-end, top-of-the-line sports car, but you know what? It's a fairly good car. It's reliable. I don't have to worry about it. And I feel like that's what Jonathan Taylor can bring to a team at the NFL, where it's like, hey, he's not going to be the guy that's the dual threat, receiving, rushing, although he can catch the ball. He's more of a runner. He's not going to be that power guy. We're not going to expect him to be that, but he can have some of that and burst through the line and have that speed to where I just think dependability when I come to Jonathan Taylor, kind of like I almost want to compare him to ex-Wisconsin running back Melvin Gordon, where it's like he could be that, where it's like, you know what? Do you have to worry about Melvin Gordon? No, you don't. Melvin Gordon's your running back. I mean, this year you kind of do, so bad example. But years before, Chargers, no, he's our running back. No, we don't have a problem. He's going to be our running back. So you guys can kind of help me fill in the missing pieces. I had just started thinking about that today before I started to record. I'm like, maybe this makes a little bit of sense. Or maybe it makes no sense. You guys let me know. But then it kind of made me think of the cramp, the injury. And I know it's just a cramp, and people are going to say, Ricky, it's just a cramp. He's going to play this weekend. He's going to be no problem. But if he misses games for this, I don't think it's going to hurt Jonathan Taylor at all. And the reason why I say that is you look at Leonard Fournette, you look at Todd Gurley. To me, the only reason Todd Gurley went 10th overall was he tore his ACL. I remember watching that game like, oh no, Todd Gurley tore his ACL. I thought he was going to be one of the top 5 picks in that draft because you look at it was his sophomore year, and it was like, oh my God, if this guy could come out this year, he'd be phenomenal. Then you look at the next year, and it was like, man, it's not as phenomenal, but he's still really fucking good. And then he tears his ACL, and you're like, oh no. Oh, what's going on? No. What's this going to do? And luckily he fell to the Rams, and he's in a good spot, but it's like, that's the only reason he fell was because of the severity of that injury, tearing your ACL. Then you look at Leonard Fournette. He had an ankle injury, and I know he's kind of dealt with it in his NFL career as well, but he had an ankle injury and still went top 4. So, I mean, Jonathan Taylor, I feel like even if this cramping injury keeps him out a game or two, it's not going to hurt him like it did Todd Gurley because of the severity of the injury. It's not that severe of an injury. So let's see. Talked about how he's different than the other 4. Talked about the injury concern, how it's not going to hurt him. There's only one other thing to kind of decide whether or not he's going to be a top 5 pick, and that's what teams are going to be there. And if I go to Tankathon right now, there are 7 teams that are winless in the NFL right now. You've got the New York Jets, You've got the Cincinnati Bengals, the Miami Dolphins, the Pittsburgh Steelers, which their pick is with Miami, the Washington Redskins, the Denver Broncos, and the Arizona Cardinals. And out of those teams, you look at the Jets, they've got Le'Veon Bell, Joe Mixon's with the Bengals, the Dolphins, they're one. They could take a running back. So you got the Dolphins with one, and they've got technically 2 picks right now in the top 7. Washington could also take him. I know Adrian Peterson, but he's getting kind of old. They could take a running back. And then the Broncos don't need it. They got Lindsey and Freeman. And the Cardinals don't need it because they've got David Johnson. So that's technically 3 of the top 7 picks could go running back. And I know this kind of bleeds into maybe what I'm going to talk about next in the Dolphins, but really to me, that's the prime thing of who's going to be in the top 5. And if Miami, let's say Pittsburgh has a phenomenally bad year and they're a top 5 pick, and Miami just as well has 2 picks then in the top 5, they could take a stab on Jonathan Taylor. They could go ahead and say, hey, let's take him. Let's get a running back who's going to be our guy. Maybe do you pair him up with a quarterback you take in the draft? Is Josh Rosen the guy? That's a conversation they're going to have. Or let's say Washington is just above. Let's say Washington's at 2, above Miami, above both of their picks. Do they Saquon it and say, hey, you know what? We've got our quarterback. Well, the Giants took their quarterback the year later. But they could say, they being the Redskins, hey, we took our quarterback already. He started a little bit this season because I do think Dwayne Haskins starts at some point this year. Let's go ahead and get him a running back that he can rely on. Or do they say, hey, we got to get him a receiver to rely on, and they go with Jerry Jeudy? That's another discussion to where I feel like the teams right now, the teams that if they were in the top 5 could take a running back. Miami's one of them. Washington, I'm going to leave off because if I'm picking between Jerry Jeudy and Jonathan Taylor for them, I'm going to go with Jerry Jeudy. Other teams I've mentioned, Cleveland's got Nick Chubb. You've got Jacksonville. If for some reason they finish top 5, they've got Leonard Fournette. Oakland just drafted Josh Jacobs. Chargers have Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler's looking pretty good. I don't think Chargers are top 5, though. They're going to turn it around. Derrick Henry in Tennessee. Saquon in New York. Christian McCaffrey. Devonta Freeman. The list goes on and on. The rest of the teams, I don't think, are going to be anywhere near the top 5 to where, in my mind, if he goes top 5, and that's being Jonathan Taylor, it's to either the Redskins or the Miami Dolphins. And who knows? Something could catastrophically happen. A team could also say, let's say like the Cardinals go, fuck it, we're going to trade David Johnson. At that point, holy shit, they could use a running back and could take Jonathan Taylor. But I have a feeling, if you ask me today, gun to my head, is Jonathan Taylor going to be a top 5 pick? I am going to say no. The reason why is I don't think he has the same, I'm going to say, hype around him at this point. I mean, around the college football world, people know about Jonathan Taylor. But I think it's going to be, if he's going to want to break through, it's kind of like how Saquon, he's got to kind of like break through like Saquon did through all the quarterbacks, although Saquon had higher named quarterbacks than this class. If we compared the two, I would take that class over this class, but that might be a conversation for a different day. At this point, I don't think he's a top 5 pick because of the teams that will be there. Talent-wise, for sure, could be a top 5 pick, but unless Miami or Washington are in the top 5 and going to take a steal or take basically a stab at him to be on their team, I don't know if Jonathan Taylor ends up being a top 5 pick in next year's draft. This is where you guys come in. Let me know what you guys think down below in that comment section. Am I dead wrong? Jonathan Taylor is going to be a top 5 pick. Tell me why. Tell me what team you think he can go to. Tell me what you think of Jonathan Taylor. And also, is he going to win the Heisman? That kind of plays into this as well. Let me know what you guys think down below.